And welcome everybody to TNM Unplugged and Zoran Todorovic Space podcast. We are so happy that you're here with us today to get elevation of your vibration to the next level of itself, to be able to dive into your soul, to connect to your heart, and to evolve yourself. All of these podcasts are created just for you to be able to transform, to transcend, and to become a better version of yourself. And today on my podcast, I have a friend, and it's going to be like I'm drinking coffee with my friend and we're just chatting. And this podcast came to me because Lizzy and I had such a wonderful conversations when we have coffees. And we were chatting and I was like, I have to have you on my podcast because you're such an interesting and inspirational woman. And I know that so many people are going to benefit from what you want to share and from our conversation. And this is how we have Lizzy Clarke with us today. But you want to know a little bit more about herself. So Lizzy is a writer and art director in the film, television, and advertising industry. For the past 25 years, she worked alongside of the world's leading film directors, collaborating in the creative process of filmmaking. So she's a wizard on that level as well. She's also a visionary with a passion for storytelling, which I think is extremely important nowadays. She's living a very creative lifestyle on this wonderful island of Ibiza that we both live in right now, when she has been living in past 12 years. And she's also working globally from this island. She's also dedicated to her personal transformation, to her personal development, to the growth. She's also passionate about holistic and healthy living and longevity as well. And today we're going to dive into different topics. This is going to be one of these podcasts when we're chatting about creativity, we're chatting about well-being, we're chatting about healing, we're chatting about personal transformation. So just dive in with us and let's see where this podcast takes us. It's going to be a very interesting conversation. And welcome, Lizzy.
Thank you, Zoran. Nice to see you, as always. Thank you for that lovely introduction.
Isn't it? You know, this is one of these things that I do really well. You know, when I introduce people, they feel like, la, elevation of the soul. So you have been in the creative industry for a very long time. And, you know, when I'm thinking about creativity nowadays, I keep on saying to people, creativity is one of the most important competencies. When you have creativity, when you're able to be creative, when you're able to express your creativity, you can actually be successful in your life. So I was just curious to start with our conversation. How did you get into this creative journey? What inspired you to, first of all, start with the creative profession? And then how do you express your creativity in your work nowadays?
I think, you know, from like many creatives, I knew I was creative from a very young age. And I think, you know, my curiosity and my imagination was really apparent to my parents. So they, you know, they encouraged me to find role models and just gave me the free space to watch films. And so I started watching films and became obviously quite obsessed with filmmaking and photography from really young. So I was given a camera and just allowed to kind of explore that creativity. Then I went to university and studied. I think education is really important for creativity. It's not just talent, it's learned. So you learn the skills around the creativity. That's the framework to support it. And then I was mentored by a top fashion photographer. So I think being in a creative environment with other creatives, you know, of course, then that grows your creativity. And I learned from masters in the field. I guess it was just a very natural evolutionary process that was encouraged by friends and family.
Exactly. So from your early time, you really knew that you were creative, and therefore you were lucky enough that your parents were unfolding your creativity and helping you out and directing you to express that gift and talent. And I was specifically curious about this mentoring experience because, as you know, we're a coaching podcast. When you recall that mentoring experience, you know, for you, why was that significant? You know.
Because it elevated, it raised my game, you know. So I was working with people like 15 years older than me who were top of their field, and I observed, and I was taken under the wing and shown the ropes, and the inspiration and the knowledge and the technique of filmmaking was explained to me by by very established film directors.
Yeah,
So
great.
they gave me space to explore my own vision and find my own expression and creative voice, and showed me how to collaborate and share that vision, eloquently express, and and take creative briefs and give creative briefs. So they drew me into the collaborative process of creativity.
Yeah. And I think that's extremely important, because creatives that I know, sometimes they think they can do everything themselves, right? There is this creative surge inside of people. I'm creative and I know, So I'm super excited when people mention creatives like you, that they had mentors and guides and coaches to help them shape their creativity, to help them tap into their creativity and really become the most realized potential of their creative self. So I'm so happy you had that experience. Now, we ask the big questions on this podcast. So, you're ready. I know you are. So when you think about yourself and your creativity, where do you get your creative inspirations from? So when you are in this process of, writing the scripts or supporting the advertising campaigns and working with the film directors to really help them out to become more creative, there must be a moment somewhere there inside of you, right, that your creative ideas come from. So what would you say on that?
It's abstract. It's very much a holistic process for me. So I can be inspired by dreams or something that catches my eye externally. It's also very internal. So I'm tapping into a well of creativity that's accessing the greater consciousness of creativity. So an idea will drop in if I'm in the flow state, and it's like a sniffer dog, and I follow a trail. So I'll get a moment of inspiration from here, and it will take me on a journey. I also read a lot. I browse the internet a lot, and I look abstractly outside of the field. So I might be looking for a film reference or inspiration, and I might find that in a photograph because it tells 1,000 words, or I might find it in a magazine. So I think that being a massive reader and trawling through creative inspiration from multidisciplinary fields, and then I shape it into my own vision and it's a holistic process.
Very holistic approach of playing with the field, playing with the research, tapping into different energies, and then shaping that creativity from inside out.
Yeah, and it's historical as well, because we'll look for references from very old films or very old photographs as well as current. So it's like an amalgamation of the past and present, and then imagination into what could be the future of something that's not yet been created. So I feel the originality, which is creativity, comes out of pulling from very many different sort of threads and angles and perspectives to shape it to something that's unique for the now.
Yeah. So with that in mind, you're playing with the collective consciousness, right? So you are kind of getting into the field of collective, and you're going backwards and forwards. You said, from the reference, from the research from the past, and then you're looking into the future. So you're basically in this field of collective consciousness and kind of tapping into it and understanding it.
Yeah. So, and also as we go back to it being a collaborative process, a producer will say, well, what about this? The director will say, what about this? And the costumes, and together, we create the vision.
So what would you say to some of the people who listen to this podcast also come from business? And, I teach collaboration in business. And I know that a lot of people are struggling with collaboration and collaborative processes because they're not strictly defined. They're not linear. They're not, you do this, I do that. It's like a jamming session. So how do you navigate collaboration? Why is collaboration so important for creativity, for you, and then for everybody else around you?
I think it makes a richer narrative when you're collaborating. I think, it's obviously very important to have your own vision and your own stance, but it's also super important to listen. In conversations with directors, I'll spend, obviously listening intently. And then you'll pick up some particular point and roll with that together. So I think that listening is key, and clear communications, because we don't have a lot of time in my field, and I don't get a lot, people are working globally and remotely. So we have to pick up on the nuances of what people are thinking. And just keeping those lines of communication going. I
Yeah.
think.
Yeah.
So you go off on your own for a little bit, so you
Mhm.
have your free floating space
Mhm.
to find your expression, and then you share it in a very clear and succinct way, and then you bounce back. And it's really important when that bounce back happens that you're still and you really are in the moment, and you're absorbing their vision, which is not always verbalized. So you have to
Yeah.
look at visual references that are shared and really kind of like embrace all of this information that's coming to you, and then find your path.
Yeah. Yeah, I love how you explain this, and this is, when it bounces back, when you kind of embrace it and you communicate clearly, this is all the life skills that people actually do have. But some people always say creative collaboration is so messy. It's so many, voices and opinions and, things that are going on, but it's a creative process. That's what I was driving to, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's a lot to do with the stillness, because if your brain and your mind is kind of like, you're going to miss the essence, the thread, which, the vision. So I think that sort of holding space,
Mm-hmm.
is really important, and
Mm-hmm.
listening,
Mm-hmm.
and then taking a step back and absorbing, and then pulling back. Like I reframe things, you're sort of like very detail focused, and then you'll pull back and you'll pull back, and I almost change lenses,
Yeah.
and look at things from multiple perspectives, and then feel into it. You've got to be still enough to feel the emotion. You have to hear that emotional beat. What is the feeling I'm experiencing right now? And then you have to shift. If I'm doing comedy and I start feeling a weighted energy, then I know I have to buoyance myself up again to create something that's comedic. So it's in looking at the details as well as looking at the broader picture. That you
Wonderful.
sculpt the film that you're making.
Yeah.
So so I think being respectful with the people that you're collaborating with as well. I think that's huge, because it's very easy to go off on your own ego journey.
Yes.
And then you can waste time. So I always have to park my ego, so that I'm able to collaborate well, and have respect for the people I'm collaborating with. Their ideas matter.
Yeah. So that parking your ego, it's our segue into the next level of conversation, because I know that you're also passionate about personal development, about healthy living, about holistic living. And a lot of the times when people talk about creativity and you talk about creative genius, you talk about creative artists, there is a level of them going to some kind of challenging life experiences, maybe early on in their life, maybe in the adolescent, it doesn't really matter, but they all had these extremely challenging circumstances to overcome and to transform themselves into something completely different. And sometimes that pain that was created in their life, or whatever disorder or trauma or whatever happened in their life, actually it's polishing their creativity, and it's also taking them to the next level of themselves, right? It's like, the typical thing about the tortured artist, the artist will funnel, their trauma into their art, and this will be their therapy, basically. They will be able to heal themselves from that space. So what is your journey into that? What happened to you so that you can be that creative? Because, it happens to people, for some reason, isn't it? Right? So what would you
Yeah, I mean, I think that, when you're, bravery is very key, because,
Yeah.
of course, with accountants, 1+1 does equal 2. With creativity, it's abstract. So there is no right or wrong equation. There's only an expression of self. So I think that when you've had challenging circumstances in your childhood or in your adulthood, being forced to find your unique perspective and express that is a trained skill. And of course you have to be very brave, because you have to be convinced that your point of view or your expression is worth sharing, and you have to overcome the blocks of rejection or failure, or someone doesn't like my art, and you put your heart into it. It's very painful. So I think that if you continue to be in a creative industry throughout your life, you've got to be very skilled at overcoming fear, and bravery. And I was born with ADHD, so I didn't know that I had this condition until later in life when I got diagnosed. So I always felt that I was different. So there was a huge challenge to sort of be okay with not being normal, being weird, being different, and daydreaming, and and also sort of believing that the power of imagination is a true power, because we're taught not to daydream at school and not to use our imagination, but to stay practical and logical. So to reject that, it takes a lot of courage. But I'm very joyful that I'm creative, because I see the beauty of life, and I'm always looking for beauty and harmony and balance and flow. So I think it's honoring that, that's a worthwhile thing to do and to have,
Yeah. So Lizzy, when you think about your life, and you kind of realize that you have this harmony in yourself, and you now got, okay, now I understand why I'm not like normal, like everybody else, so to say. Normality is just a construct. We don't want to use that. How did that help you transform yourself? What did you do in order to really take that as something good and positive in your life that can evolve you to the next level of yourself? I'm just curious a little bit about your journey, because I think your journey is such a beautiful journey to be shared, because it's so empowering for people who are listening as well, and who don't have any mapping or any reference around that, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, you've got to read a lot. I think you need to learn a lot. You need to look at people who've already experienced what you've experienced, so that you don't feel so lonely in your situation. And thinking outside of the box is a superpower. So I've always
I love that. Thinking out of the box is a superpower. We need to bookmark this. Lizzy said, thinking out of the box is a superpower. And she also said, imagination is a superpower. So we already are talking about two superpowers, right?
Yeah, I think I'm interested in like dynamic, practical creativity, So I think that, people who say, don't worry about paying the bills, actually pay the bills first. And you know what I mean? Because I think creativity needs a practical framework. And then once you have your practical framework, which I learned in exercise, nutrition, good sleep, fresh air, nature connection, is the kind of like the house that safely houses creativity. So I've kind of like had to learn discipline, practical, logical, in order that my creativity flourishes and blossoms. Because creativity doesn't do well in fear. It does well in love, and in sort of, for me personally. So I've disciplined myself to kind of do the practical day-to-day things, and then I can be romantic and flow and be artistic and imaginative, because without that it crumbles.
Yeah. So there is a frame that you created for yourself in your personal development that creates that level of discipline, personal discipline, which I personally love. It's your daily ritual, it's your daily practice, right? Something that you're consistently doing all the time to keep that container strong. And then within that container, then you can flourish and imagine and create and alchemize or do whatever you...
Exactly. So I mean, having ADHD and treating that and working with specialists and experts in the field, oxygenating the brain through exercise, meditating to still the mind and be able to hold space and listen intently. Nutrition, helps with my vibration and my frequency, eating the right foods, drinking enough water. So I put all of those very practical, sort of holistic well-being rituals and techniques before I light my candles, or I put nice music on and create the right space for creativity. So I micromanage quite a lot of aspects of my life to support sustaining a creative lifestyle.
Yeah. Wonderful. And is it a combination of all of these elements that creates the strong container or strong foundation for you, right?
Yeah, I think that's the only way to be sustainable, sustainably creative in this time. I don't want to be a tortured artist. I don't drink alcohol. I'm not going to sit there and write a book and drink whiskey. And, that's an old notion of what artists are. Artists, I think, in this day and age should be healthy, balanced, grounded, practical,
abundant.
Because
a lot of artists are like, I'm drinking whiskey and writing my book, but who's going to sell my book and how much money I'm going to... Who cares? But you need abundance as well to be able to flourish creativity. Yeah,
exactly.
So that's your calling for the new artists nowadays. They really have to get their game to the next level and leave behind this archetype of tortured artists. And how would you call this new archetype of the artist that is emerging? I mean, we never talked about it. What comes to you? What is, instead of tortured artists, they're becoming what? They're becoming...
I think content.
Content.
I think, I set an intention, I create what I intend to create, and then I feel content. So I'm not really in search of like happiness, the extremes. I try and avoid the extremes of either I'm a tortured artist and it's awful, or I try and take a middle ground because I think this is sustainable. So I think content, fulfillment, sense of purpose, achievement, fulfillment, bliss in moments, and being good through the range of emotions that creativity takes you through, and not losing your balance. Because I think that I used to, when I was younger, I mean, this is somebody who's been creative for 25 years. When I was younger, I would edit all night, and then I would be burnt out and I would go in these roller coasters, and I prefer something that's a little bit more sustainable for my energy these days, and I feel that, well-being and contentment and joy, and this is much more powerful than the extremes of creativity.
Yeah. I'm so grateful that you're mentioning that, because I still see that those extremes, the highs and lows, are somehow associated to these intense creative processes. And actually, as you said, I've done the same thing. You burn yourself. At the end, you get to the level of exhaustion and fatigue, and you're not really able to function normally. Then you need stimulants to keep yourself going. So when we're talking about the new creative archetype, they need to be in balance, in harmony, in beauty, in abundance, in contentment. I love that word that you mentioned, content with themselves, content with the present moment, and content with their creative processes. Yeah. And you also mentioned something interesting that I just want to revisit quickly. You said there's a range of emotions that you go through, right, when you're creating, and you need to be able to kind of ride that way and balance and experience all of those emotions. How do you do that? Is that something that is an outcome of your balanced state, or do you have a specific way of being with the emotions through the creative processes?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's about having the emotions outside of you, not having all of the emotions, like horses, emotions, you have to take the rein of these emotions, so they don't run away with you. So you can observe the emotion taking place without being too embroiled in it, being a witness to the emotions, and then if they're positive, then they're going to naturally gently elevate you. And if I'm writing something dark, I sometimes have to write, scripts which are of subject matter that's painful. Film, we're kind of like looking at all, types of life. So I think it's ensuring that you just stay with yourself and observe these emotions, but don't be carried by them. And I think that's, setting the intention, I'll observe this emotion, but I won't let it run away with me. If you lose your groundedness, it's very hard to collaborate remotely, because if someone's on a different frequency or a different emotion at that point, you can have a disconnect. And you always need to stay connected to your team, so you must be very much in control and mastering of your emotions, so that when we're under a lot of pressure and somebody doesn't like the words I've written, I won't take it personally, so it's really important to just stay really kind of grounded in the creativity, because you can't work under pressure collaboratively globally if somebody loses their cool or their calm or their collectedness or their stillness, because we don't have time for drama and upset, we just don't. So you have to be, I think you've got to be very sort of calm in order to work creatively under pressure. So that means, ownership of the emotions and not letting them get carried away with them. So I'll do things like I'll go for a walk around the block, I'll make a cup of tea, I'll move throughout my day. So I am always staying in the flow state. So I'll do a lot of moving meditation. If I come up against an emotion that's a bit aggressive and I'm struggling with it, I will literally go and do a bit of weeding or water my plants or mindfully fold some clothes, and then I'll go back to task. So I'm always very conscious of the frequency, the vibration, the emotion that I'm experiencing, and I keep it on track.
Wow. Wow. I want to learn that. I am going to do that for my meetings, because I'm also in a situation like you, when I'm kind of leading and collaborating globally. And you're absolutely right. I never thought about that. People come from different frequency. You know, somebody who joins in from Brazil and America and China or UK or Europe, depending on where they are in their life, they will just zoom into that frequency. It's so important to recognize that. And I love what you shared about observation of your emotion, that just seeing it as something that is outside of you and not taking it personally, which I think it's a superpower as well. You know, when people are, you know, in the experience of collaboration, creative processes, if somebody says something to them they don't agree or they don't like, that you don't take it personally. I think that's amazing. If we can all do this, right? Not only
I have to take a beat, you know, because if I'm working with a film director and he has a crew of 120, or she, and they're under very stressful conditions, shooting outside, and I might get something pinged back at me, which is a bit like, ooh, because they're under a lot of pressure and shooting in difficult circumstances. So I'm always mindful of whoever I'm liaising with, what their circumstances are in that moment. And if something is fired back that feels a bit, I don't jump and react to that. It just take a breath, know that we're all doing our best, staying positive, you know, and supporting one another. And that, you know, you really have to make sure your ego's in the right place to do that. It's not all about me. It should be, but it's not all about me.
It's not. No.
It's about the end vision, and we all want to make that end vision happen. So how do we make that happen? We have to be quite kind and patient with one another and not overreact.
Yeah. So,
otherwise, the creativity just drops, boom, and you've lost the vibe, you know, and you've lost the bars that we all need to keep flowing between us. Because we have to stay passionate, we have to stay engaged, we have to stay creative, you know? So
absolutely. I've been in a situation when I'm in an extremely creative kind of team, and then the creativity just drops. I know this really, really well. Out of all those circumstances, it disappears. And it's like then we have to move together to find it again and to kind of recreate it and to reconnect to each other into the field in order for this creativity to kind of raise up, because we really want unique and great and original ideas and words and statements and so far. Yeah. So I know you're also spiritual. How would you define your spirituality? What is spirituality for you, and what is your connection to, you know, let's say, source, God, universe, whatever the language you use, you know?
For me, spirituality is learning. I think that's the essence of spirituality, is learning who you are, know thyself, and diving deep within to then connect with source. It requires listening, intent listening. Again, it's back to listening, really listening and learning, you know, and then being guided. When you have mapped out the different information that you receive, separating the monkey mind, the overactive ego, and once you've mapped out your psyche and your mind, then I think you can hear more clearly when you are connecting with source. And of course, that's going into nature, again, meditation, whether that's moving meditation or not. And then I think you can, at some point, when you're still, you do hear an overriding voice, and that for me is when I'm connecting with my higher self and my intuition. Because obviously creativity is intrinsically linked to intuition, because there's no right and wrong. There's just your intuition and your heart and your connection to source. So I think that the more experience you have in meditating and contemplation, you finally hear that voice, which is your connection to source. And it's the talent is listening and not ignoring it. Chewing it. Oh, no, listen.
Yeah. What a beautiful explanation of spirituality. I love the keywords of learning and listening and connecting, right? And really tapping into that guidance. And how do you talk? I know that people love, you know, me asking kind of funny questions as well. And so how do you talk to your guides? So you said when you connect and you open up and you're connected to your higher self, you're connected to your intuition, right? So because that's the essence of creative heartbeat. So how do you talk to your guides, and what do they tell you sometimes?
I chat with that person. I look at the energy around somebody, because I can see energy very clearly. And so I'll ask them, what's the next step that I should take? Do I stay still, pull back, or go forwards? And I look for symbols as well, signs from the universe. So I'm very connected to the universe in symbolic terms. So I will notice the dragonfly that flies past, and I think that's high frequency thought. It's a good sign. I'll get the chair in the cinema that's row 11, seat 11, because I think it's funny. I think it's funny to interact with your guys to see what happens. It's like, I'll test you too, we have to play and we have to interact, so for me, it's not a one way, it's a two way.
Yeah, of course, with any relationship, that's why I'm asking you, really, isn't it?
No, I'm not just sat there in blind faith, going, oh, save me, save your, sword. Yeah. It's kind of like, so it's a playful interaction. And I think it's faith, isn't it? It's faith that my guys exist. And once I believe that I am making this connection, then they'll come to me in my dreams and I'll have an answer in the morning, or I'll be going about my day and I'll notice something, because I'm a very, very observant person. So I think that connecting with guides is a lot to do with observation as well. You have to notice things that are going on around you, the subtleties, So I think I know the voices that are my guides now. I recognize them from years and years of fine tuning. Realizing I'm not mad.
You're not. I recognize the voices.
Or schizophrenic.
I'm like, I'm not mad. My guys are really talking to me, but I now hear them, and like they use megaphone with me. At one point in time, can you hear us? And I'm like, no, I'm so busy. I'm busy. I don't have time. I'm busy. I'm looking at the mobile phone at the screens all the time. Can you hear us? Eventually you're here. But again, Lizzy, I love so much because you're bringing in that completely new levels of consciousness and understanding for people for listening, because what you said is not that so many people practice that, which is this communication, it's interaction. It's not one-way street, because I know for the fact that a lot of people will sit down in meditation, open up and receive the transmission, right? And they want to be guided and being told what to do, which is one level of communication, but it needs to be interaction with your guides. It needs to be playfulness. It needs to be observing the symbology, 1111, or a dragonfly, or the little bird, or the little flower, or the smell, or the sound, so that you recognize, wow, okay, this is communication, right? So I can then communicate back, right?
Yeah. And also, not to ignore, because you have to, when you first start connecting with spirit, is this like recognizing that voice? It's a kind voice. It's a guiding. It's not a reprimanding or sometimes I'm not religious, I am spiritual. I think, I don't want to, with religion, oh, you're bad, you haven't done this, or you're, this sinning stuff. For me, the guides are much more nurturing, gentle, and they will give you harsh, for me, blocks or circumstances that it's not always about guiding me in the right direction. It's when I'm going in the wrong direction, how they'll cut in, and I'll know that this is not the right path, So I'm showing signs for both the good and the bad, I'm
still training, you know what I mean? I have this thing to dance with myself, that I listen to meditation most of the time. But sometimes I'm still not listening. And I'm like, I didn't listen to it. I knew that. I have these moments when I knew that. I've heard the message, like turn left, don't do this, do that, clearly. And I got kind of busy with myself, ignored it. My ego kicked in, and my ego said, no, this is the right rational choice at this moment in time, and you should listen to your mind. And then I end up in a situation, I knew it. I didn't listen to myself again. I knew that. So it's also learning, right? When you said about spirituality, it's about learning how to listen and learning how to hear yourself, correct?
And really fine tuning. So, okay, that's that voice, that, that's kind of, my inner critic, that's not my guide, that kind of thing. It's such a challenge, though, to be in connection all the time, because we have so many distractions, and to live in this sort of like space of lightness and expanse and inner peace and clarity. so that you're very dynamically interplaying with spirit. That's where, we all aim to be.
Dynamic. Yes, you're the wizard of the world. You should interview me. Very dynamic interplay with the spirit. That's so beautiful. That's so cozy. Okay, listen. You and I can talk for hours because sometimes we have coffees, we talk for hours, and we have teas, we talk for hours. We have a few minutes left in our podcast. So based on this conversation and what we kind of unfolded for our audience so far, where would you like to leave audience with? What would be the natural thing that you would love to share with everybody just to feel that you have closed and completed your transmission?
Yeah, it has to be follow your bliss, Joseph Campbell. The phrase follow your bliss, because I think spirit likes us to be in a high frequency of bliss. So I think that wherever you can microwave bliss into your life and you can follow your bliss, spark joy, that moving towards things that are a high frequency for you, that you're in your blissful state of being, where you're most present and feeling good. I think that's where our lives are on our best, highest trajectory for our highest selves, if we take that follow your bliss notion.
Follow your bliss. Follow your bliss.
Yeah, whether that's what you have for dinner, or the flowers you buy, or the clothes you wear that day, or the people you connect with, or the messages you ping out. It's like always move towards that magic.
Yeah, it's a pure magic.
Believe in magic, create magic, and create little balls of positivity, and just plant these seeds of intention to follow bliss. And I think then you are definitely open to the abundance and to the highest level of consciousness and the best quality of life.
For me, this was extremely blissful experience. I hope that you have followed your bliss to come and join me into this conversation. It was such a lovely sharing, from you. As I said at the beginning, it's a multidimensional conversation. We covered so many topics, but each and every topic had a little zing, little ping, little wisdom that really can be impacting your life in the most beautiful way. So thank you very much for coming to our podcast, Lizzy. Beautiful, creative genius, writer, art director, multidimensional spiritual being of love and light, and visionary. So I'm so grateful to have you today. Once again, thank you for joining. And for the audience, thank you for tuning in. I hope this was really inspirational for me. I'm blissful. I'm ready for the rest of my day. It has elevated my spirit and the soul. It was a big reset in talking to Lizzy. Thank you so much for tuning in and listening. And we'll connect next week. Thank you and bye. Bye, Lizzy.
Bye, Zoran.